Greetings from Costa Rica. I hope you're doing well. Tonight is our February 2022 question and answer roundup here on Costa Rica Matt's live Costa Rica chat. I'm joined every Wednesday night live at 7 p.m. Costa Rica time. I'm broadcasting live here from Playa Junquial, Guanacaste, Costa Rica. This is our last broadcast of February, which means we're going to go over questions that viewers have posted over the last month. I'm also going to try and address as many questions as I can in the comments and questions that we get tonight. And I'm also going to cover a quick news roundup, tell you about what's happening in Costa Rica as of February 2022, so that you have an idea of what's going on. Tonight, some of the questions that we're going to cover from viewers just like you from the last month include what political candidates in Costa Rica's presidential election have been saying about the new law to incentivize foreign investment. We're going to talk about what a $500 per month health insurance policy gets for your family. We're going to talk a little bit about herbicide and pesticide use here in the country. We'll go over updates regarding investor status. We'll go over cashew trees. We'll talk about packing for the beach and what you should take. And finally, we'll touch on building costs. My name is Matt Rosensteel. I'm the owner-broker of Latitude 10 Realty here in Playa Junquial. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. And if you do like straightforward information about Costa Rica, I highly recommend you subscribe to my channel so that you can get updates about what's happening here in the country and with the Costa Rica real estate market. Again, this is our February question and answer roundup. Thanks for joining tonight. Cheers and stay tuned. Good evening, folks. February 2022 in Costa Rica was a month where the news is filled with F words. Let's start off by giving a quick news roundup of where we are as of February 23rd, 2022. If you're watching tonight and you want to post a question, I'll try to answer it this evening. And if we don't get to it, we'll be trying to cover it in next month's roundup of all the questions we've received here tonight. I want to start by touching on a few of these F words in Costa Rica news. First of all, we've got freedom here in Costa Rica. A lot of people are celebrating as the Costa Rica government announced as of April 1st, they will do away with the QR code restrictions, or rather, instead of operating in a system where businesses can only open for 100% capacity if they're verifying people's QR codes, as of April 1st, that is all going to be scrapped. March will be the last month that you see that enforced in Costa Rica, at least for the time being, and so people are very much happy. I'd like to remind all of my faithful viewers out there, to use another F word, when the QR code was first announced, a ton of people panicked in Costa Rica, and my reaction was primarily that no one should panic because in Costa Rica, things like this never get implemented quickly. Nothing ever drastically changes your life that fast, and you never see the government take such quick action that all of a sudden from one day to the next, you're looking at a different country. So as of April, the system is going away. In my area, we never really even saw it implemented. We live in a rural, quiet part of northwestern Guanacaste. And honestly, I have not been asked to show a QR code one single time where I wasn't at the airport and coming into the country where, yes, I had to upload my health information and provide proof of vaccination, etc. That was it. The system is already moving out in a month, and I know that some people are going to be extremely pleased about that. Our next Costa Rica February news update, the F word is Figueres. If you've been watching, lately the country has been in the midst of the national election, which actually happened just a couple weeks ago on February 6th, I believe, at least the initial national election. That was to determine who was going to be president and who was going to be the 57 members of Costa Rica's unicameral legislative assembly. That election actually turned out inconclusive, as many do, where no presidential candidate got 40% of the vote. And by the rules of the Costa Rica presidential system, they will now need to have a runoff between the top two presidential candidates who finished that race. The top candidate, the person who everybody thinks is most likely going to be president, was Jose Maria Figueres, our F word, from the Partido Liberación Nacional, or the National Liberation Party, PLN. Jose Maria Figueres won about 28% of the vote. His nearest competitor, Rodrigo Chavez of the Partido Progreso Social Democrático, or PPSD, the nearest competitor got about 17% of the vote, and so now they go into a runoff. Again, Jose Maria Figueres, which as a member of the PLN, came into this election as a strong favorite because a lot of political watchers in Costa Rica would have recognized that the country was ready to go back to sort of the old, steady, reliable party after a few different experiments with others. The PLN has had 10 presidents in power since the 1948 Civil War. So we're looking at, about 70 years of Costa Rica history, and 40 of them have been filled with PLN presidents. Jose Maria Figueres is the son of the PLN leader who originally led the forces that corrected Costa Rica's 1948 election. And this runoff is an interesting situation because you have him and the stalwart, sort of popular, very old institutional party in the PLN. His competitor, Rodrigo Chavez, is definitely a bit more conservative politically, and he's from a party that was only formed in 2018. In Costa Rica, you do see this movement a lot more often, with political parties being created or disbanded, and some of these achieving very good success. In this case, 4 years later, they've got somebody in the presidential runoff. This is the PPSD. And part of that is because, as I mentioned, Costa Rica is a very pluralist political system. You see tons of voices with little bits and pieces of influence. And it can be much easier for a new political party here to capture the imagination of people and really rock it up to a position of importance than it can be in a system where there are only two political parties. I wanted to show one quick, do I still have that article up? Unfortunately, I don't, but I was looking at the two candidates positioned on a, three-dimensional political spectrum where, their views on globalism, liberalism, etc., were all sort of laid out in a chart. And they both happen to be about a half inch apart in the bottom corner, with the neoliberal sort of progressive ideology dominating what they think. You'll see that Costa Rica in general doesn't have ultra conservative candidates that do very well, and that really when push comes to shove, even though there are 9 political parties that currently have seats in the Legislative Assembly, all of those 9 might fit in a very narrow spectrum in the political, sort of science analysis. And when push comes to shove, a lot of these politicians here in Costa Rica aren't quite as different from one another as people might imagine or just sort of guess based on how the news media acts and tries to contrast them. Our third F word for the news in February here in 2022 are flowers. And I'm happy to say that this time of year in Costa Rica is marked very much by the blooming of some spectacular trees around our area. And I actually got some very poor video of some of these trees because I procrastinated and only shot these things as the light was going down. But we've got robles, which are oak relatives, flowering in our area. That was the first white tree. These are carraus, this red tree that you see flowering. Right now, all throughout the area, you have this absolute explosion of white, pink, and sort of red flowers happening on these trees, and it's part of what makes Guanacaste really special. The quantity and different flowering species that we have here. And it's not just some small quantity of flower. You see absolute explosions. Like right here, this is a roble that I drove past this afternoon. And you can see the white flowers just bursting from the top are absolutely spectacular. Here's another one in a field. And really, this is one of the things that I think people undervalue about our area in those flowering trees. To move on to our last news update as of February here, it's a 4-letter F word that everybody really loves, and it's fire. I'm afraid to say that Guanacaste and this cattle ranching region still has a lot of fire happening as people clear out brush on their large pieces of land. This is something that's taken a lot of people by surprise, and I think some that come down here without ever having seen the area in the dry season. It's really, really kind of horrifying to see. I'll go ahead and just post a couple clips. This is from us driving down the highway this afternoon, and you'll see there are large fires burning through forests in our area. This is all sort of scrubland that people have, and here you can see we're driving down the main highway, and off to one side, we've got forest fires happening. A couple important things to understand with the fires are that, first of all, in Guanacaste, we're very lucky because the trees don't have that pine, that pitch or tar that takes fires to an incredibly high temperature. So all of this is slow burning sort of brush fires happening that are not nearly as intense as what you might see in the Western US. And second of all, it's also important to understand in Guanacaste that this is part of a much broader historic trend that is very slowly and positively changing. When I moved here in 2008, every hillside in Guanacaste was burned every single dry season because people used the practice to clear land and create room for their cattle grasses every single year. And even some of the protected spaces were burned as well. Currently, you're seeing burning throughout the province and especially in the Nicoya Peninsula. One of the most encouraging things that makes my heart leap with joy is that these fires have enormous numbers of volunteer fire brigade members responding to them. A couple weeks ago, I went out to sort of volunteer and help rake around one little, very small fire. And I was so pleased to see that there were over 24 people there these volunteer fire brigade members out ready to fight the fires and working against them. 15 years ago, there was not a single soul who gave a hoot about these fires and the yearly use in the hills to clean brush. You are seeing that Guanacaste is transitioning to a culture where people abhor fire, where they think it is wrong and where they understand its consequences. And even though we have fires out of control this year over in the hills on the north side of our watershed, down by Eco Lagarto, a project to the south of us, you have more fires up by Playas del Coco, fires burning out of control. I still am so hopeful and really happy to see that this is no longer acceptable and simply part of what happens every year, but instead it is becoming something that's culturally unacceptable. And I look forward to a day, maybe 10, 20, 30 years in the future, where the culture has changed enough that we don't see forest fires out of control. The current reality is that we absolutely do get forest fires. People light their farms on fire to start the brush and clear out space to be able to work their land. And they very rarely take care of those fires, and so they just burn off into the hills. And for people who have recently purchased property in Guanacaste, this can be shocking and pretty disappointing. They might have imagined that this was going to be just pure tropical rainforest, or they might have imagined that everybody in Costa Rica has this amazing environmental, pura vida, I protect nature perspective. And that's very much not the case. We're in a culture that's transitioning from very intense cattle ranching agriculture in the Nicoya Peninsula to a mixed economy of tourism and other sources. So don't be surprised to see these fires. Don't be too worried because they're not burning nearly as hot as the fires in the US and other parts of the world that destroy buildings. And feel happy, feel encouraged, because Costa Rica is changing very quickly to a culture where you won't see this. And yes, it may take 5, 10, 20 years, but this is the change that is actually happening. And people who have been here 20 years are very happy to see that at least Costa Ricans are responding. Let's start talking about some of the questions our viewers have posted on Costa Rica Matt's channel over the past month. And sorry once again to have given way too long of an intro before getting to the main point. First of all, one user asked, what have the current political candidates said about the foreigner incentive law to attract investment here through that $150,000 investment status, through the car, the incentives that they were offering to bring in trucks, etc. Let's go back to what I was saying earlier, that the country is likely to elect a candidate from the PLN, or Partido Liberación Nacional. Both political candidates, the presidential people who are still in the race, Jose Maria Figueres and Rodrigo Chavez, are not at all radicals. And in fact, Jose Maria Figueres was already president from 1994 until 1998. So you can essentially expect that from the perspective of Costa Rica's future political trajectory, you're going to see mainly the status quo. This law to attract foreigners, which lowered the requirement for investor status down to 150,000, and which gave you the opportunity to bring in a container of goods without any taxes. That law has been passed. It's been approved by the legislature and signed by the president of Costa Rica, currently Carlos Alvarado, of a different political party. Going forward, I can guarantee 99.999% that legislation is not going to be touched, because the future president aside from the likelihood that there's not going to be anyone who wants to rock the boat, the future president is very much not going to go back on this policy of very much encouraging foreign investment, and you can expect the legislation to stand. Now, how quickly that gets implemented and how things go and how people begin to take advantage of it, that's a little bit more ambiguous at this point, and we're still waiting to figure out a lot of the questions as to how this law gets implemented. But I can guarantee that neither presidential candidate here in Costa Rica is going to take any kind of contrary stance towards foreigners or really change their heading in terms of the national direction when it comes to encouraging foreign investment and really trying to get as many US, Canadian, and European citizens to buy property here as possible. I'll need a refreshment break. Thank you very much for those who have already posted your questions. I really appreciate that. And cheers to all of you who have not yet and are just waiting in the wings. Second of all, there was a question about an insurance policy that I brought up last week or 2 weeks ago when I was talking about healthcare in Costa Rica. I got a quote for a $500 per month family health insurance policy for our family of 4, and one viewer wanted to know what exactly that would cover, so let's go over that. The deductible on that $500 per month policy would only be $500. It would cover all 4 members of my family, one of which is 4, one of which is 7, and 2 of which are 37. And it would cover our expenses up to $2 million here in Costa Rica and abroad. I thought it was interesting. I had never considered the possibility of getting a private health insurance policy here that would cover me in France, but apparently it does. The provider I'm specifically talking about is INS or INS, the Instituto Nacional de Seguros, which is by far the largest provider of insurance in Costa Rica because it used to be a state entity. They've become semi-private now that Costa Rica had to adapt its laws to CAFTA. And anyhow, INS now offers these private insurance policies, like I said, covering up to $2 million for our family of 4 with a $500 deductible. Now, it's important to note, INS specifically, the largest provider here in Costa Rica, only covers permanent residents. And it's funny because Anne-Marie and I even went in to try and get a quote from them while Anne-Marie was just beginning her first pregnancy, and we were sort of looking at how we could get health insurance. And at first we sort of talked to them about the different options and what premiums and how we could be covered, etc. And it wasn't until we specifically and repeatedly asked the representative, now, is this going to cover us before we have our residency, that he indicated, no, it doesn't work for non-residents. So if you're looking for health insurance, you can't get INS here in Costa Rica until you have your permanent residency. You'll have to find some other kind of private provider. But as an example, that $500 a month policy here in Costa Rica covers you up to $2 million, and it is an international policy that covers you elsewhere in the world. Another question I had got that was a great one. I had an episode where I talked about Costa Rica ecotourism, the green image, and whether or not Costa Rica is truly living up to this green image that it has. One person mentioned and asked about Costa Rica's herbicide and pesticide use, which is a very interesting point to bring up. I'm giving a shout out to Mary Catherine right now, and she can watch that on the recorded version tomorrow. It is true that Costa Rica is the country with the highest use of pesticides per cultivated acre of land. That is not just fake news, it is a real fact. They use over 25 kilograms of pesticides per hectare of cultivated land here in the country. And boy, that's a discouraging statistic if you're hoping to come to a place that is absolutely pura vida and green. Here are some thoughts to think about. The Costa Rica agricultural economy involves some of the most heavily pesticide dependent products on earth. And in particular, a large quantity of Costa Rica's agricultural exports are still pineapples and bananas. I say still because obviously over decades they've been diversifying their economy a lot. But those two products still make up a huge portion of what the country is producing and exporting. I read something that there were about 43,000 hectares or 100,000 acres of pineapple production in the country, and there are about twice as many acres of banana production in the country. Those numbers mean that Costa Rica's primary exports are crops for which the modern agricultural system uses a lot of pesticides. What I would argue about this fact that Costa Rica uses more pesticides than anybody else per hectare is really that, modern agriculture, factory farming, whatever you want to call it, uses this amount of pesticides for this mix of crops. And Costa Rica is probably very little, not different at all from other countries in the amount that they're actually using. It just happens to be that some of their crops are two of the worst pesticide consuming crops in the world currently, and that definitely warps the statistic. I definitely see in Guanacaste, our area with a lot of expats moving in, a very strong movement to create and consume more organic food. Every month, you get more suppliers offering organic veggies and fruits, and that's happening all over the country. You see it here in Guanacaste sort of as the vanguard because here expats are willing to pay that premium for organic. You also have sort of that very health-oriented culture in our province, but it is changing, and you will see over time, if you want to come here and eat food that is not covered in pesticides, you do have the option. Costa Rica just has a bad rap because, yes, a huge amount of our production is covered in pesticides, and that's the bananas and pineapples. One user asked for an update on investor status and where things stand with that. I want to mention that I have an interview that will be published on this channel with Andrea Rojas, an immigration attorney. And in that interview, we cover specifically that question. Long story short is that, yes, the investor status residency law has been approved. It is officially Costa Rica law at this point, but it is currently in a weird purgatory, this gray area where there's no infrastructure or real system to actually implement the law in place. It's tough to tease out how this would actually play on the ground, but the attorney I speak to, Andrea, encouraged people to just go ahead and import their goods, your container plus up to 2 vehicles, without paying the import taxes. She said it's just going to be very complicated because at the points of entry, they really have no systems to actually exempt you from the taxes, etc. So it is going to be tricky at this point. But yes, it's all approved. It is Costa Rica law at this point, and it is legal to move here, spend $150,000, and gain your investor status investor residency status. If that $150,000 is the main thing you were worried about, you can absolutely come down and currently do that without a problem. It's mainly the importing side of things that's been really sort of a holdup and making not implemented yet. To move on to another question, a more fun subject, someone asked about cashew trees and whether you can buy them and how many years they will take to produce here, because I did do an episode on trees. I've got about 10 species planted around my house that I mentioned in that episode. Cashews was not one of them, but it's absolutely a critical native species. Cashews are native to the New World tropic region. These trees are incredibly productive and they do well here. You see the difference when you're trying to grow different trees around your yard. The citrus that's non-native, you have to water, you have to really take care of, you have to fertilize, you have to treat it like an absolute baby. A cashew tree, on the other hand, honestly, I wouldn't even recommend trying to buy one because they're particularly difficult trees to transplant. I've seen a lot of them do horribly when you buy them as sort of a sapling and then you try and move them. A cashew nut on the ground in Guanacaste will germinate almost 100% of the time. And if you get that cashew nut to germinate, you'll be amazed at how fast trees will grow up from it. Again, non-native versus native. A citrus tree probably takes 10 years to get to that 15 to 20 foot height where you've got great production, a green tree that looks beautiful in your yard. A cashew tree is going to take a lot less. I think you could get it up above your head in 5 to 10 years. Absolutely no problem, because these things are native and they grow like weeds. I don't know about production. Should have looked it up to try and get a general idea. I would guess that it's still going to take 7 to 10 years to actually start producing the fruit and nuts. But I can guarantee you the growth rate of the tree, the way that it resists the summer here, its need for water and everything that it can do, is going to make it a very good tree to include in that mix around your house. We've got sort of our really high, needy trees, the trees that are require the most maintenance, very close to our house. And I think 5, 10, 15, a while ago, Anne-Marie and I took cashews up to our hill. We throw them up there because that tree can absolutely grow like a weed. We won't have to take care of it. We can leave it up on our hill for years. We have plenty of cashews in the area, and you'll see people producing it. And it's definitely a tree you should include in that mix of Costa Rica native species that absolutely are valuable to plant in and around your property. So thanks very much for that question about cashews. Next, I had a question about packing for the beach, and someone wanted to know, what's the minimum you should take to the beach in Costa Rica? And I really like the question because, to be honest, here you will find that, for example, the enforcement of traffic laws is very sparse. Why do I say that? In most situations, you really don't even need to take your wallet to the beach if you don't need the money. And the long story short would be, I would only take the possessions to the beach that I knew 100% I wanted to use. So yeah, if we're going out there early enough in the afternoon that we're going to have time to sit, have a drink, and really enjoy ourselves, we're absolutely going to take our beach chairs. We'll take an umbrella if we think that we won't have access to our shady areas. We'll take our cooler with beers. we'll take a number of things, to have a comfortable few hours out there. I'll take money, a credit card, and my driver's license absolutely consistently because I feel comfortable and I know how I'm going to manage things. But in most circumstances, really, you can head out to the beach with almost nothing: your bathing suit, your flip-flops, your sunscreen, and the less that you leave in your car or the less that you have to take care of while you're at the beach, the more you're going to enjoy yourselves. And, for example, on most afternoons where I don't need it, I'd love to leave my phone at home. I wouldn't take my ID because it's a short drive and I am pretty guaranteed that police won't be pulling me over. And so I limit myself to stuff taking out to the beach that honestly I'm going to use there that isn't valuable, and that, some days it might literally just be a can of beer that we pack, knowing that we'll only have 15 or 20 minutes. Other days, we're taking gallons of water to wash ourselves off afterwards because there's no bathrooms. We'll take those chairs, an umbrella, a cooler. We'll take a grill, a charcoal chimney, meets on and on and on and on because we're doing a longer beach stay. What I would say is try and take absolutely as little as possible, because really you only have to worry about taking care of it and watching out to make sure that it's not swiped from your car. The last question I had got from previous videos that I wanted to address, somebody had brought up the cost of building in Costa Rica. And I'm happy to say that, as I've mentioned on my channel before, prices are still, for quality builders in our area, about $125 per square foot for concrete, high quality construction. You can go as high as you want above there, and absolutely you can go below $125 per square foot, which is about $1,300 per square meter. But 125 is a good solid number to work with a decent contractor who is going to build you reinforced concrete construction with a ton of steel rebar, a high quality roof, and really a home that feels comfortable enough for foreigners to live in. I'm sure that with container construction and with using a lot of wood rather than concrete, you can go lower, perhaps $75 per square foot. I know that with the steel frame and sheetrock systems, they can achieve a better price per square foot result with large homes. Building steel frame homes, they might do a 6,000 or 8,000 square foot home and really bring down that per square foot number because they've achieved an economy of scale. But generally speaking, I still feel confident telling people 125 per square foot if they're looking in our area for high quality concrete construction. If they want to go with a luxury build or something on the higher end, $200 to $250 per square foot is a good number to use. And you still can go higher than that, absolutely, $250 to $350 and up. But that becomes, really when you're looking at the absolute most ridiculous high-end finishes available in Guanacaste. And in fact, I can't think of a single build right now that's gotten up to that numbers. So let's go back and start with some of the questions we've got in the comments here. I really appreciate Poplacola08 logging on even before the broadcast began, asking about taxes in Costa Rica and what types of taxes a resident or perpetual tourist can expect to pay. Are there local taxes, or are they the same across the country, sales and property? So one of the interesting things to first address is that a lot of taxes in Costa Rica are 100% the same across the country. Local municipalities, the cantones, the provinces don't have any right to pass their own taxes whatsoever. The national government sets the property tax limit that municipalities can charge. They also pass luxury taxes and other things that apply to foreigners' properties here. If you're someone who's considering buying real estate in Costa Rica, well, the most relevant taxes that you'll need to know about, first of all, the country does charge a 13% value added tax that now not only applies to most every good in the country, but almost every service. So even as a realtor, I have to charge 13% value added tax on my commission as an additional charge to my service. You see that 13% was extended to pretty much everything in the 2019 tax law that passed, I believe. Might have been a little bit earlier than that. So above and beyond the fact that everybody's paying 13% sales tax essentially on your goods and services, you've also got in the cost of buying a property approximately 2.5% taxes that are built in to a 4% tax or 4% cost that is the total cost to close a property. You're looking, when I say 4% total closing costs, you've got 2.5 that are made up of a variety of national taxes and 1.5 that is your notary fee. And then once you own your property, you'll be expected to pay a 0.25% property tax rate annually, assuming your property is fee simple and titled. That means, you're not on a beachfront concession or leased property. So you've got 0.25% as your property tax for the entire country, whether you live in our county, Santa Cruz, up in San Jose, etc. Above and beyond your 0.25% annual property tax, if you own a home that qualifies for the luxury tax, there will be an additional percentage that's somewhere between 0.25 and 0.55, I think is the absolute maximum, added on top of that. Or rather, you pay your 0.25 to the local municipality every year, and then that luxury tax, if you qualify, could be another 0.25 to 0.55 or maybe 0.65. The luxury tax is impossible to put into simple, clear terms. There's an assessment that is done to determine whether a house qualifies for the luxury tax. It's based on the size of the property, the size of the home, the location, the finishes, even certain materials that were used, etc. And you can find that, for example, multi-million-dollar homes, or rather really expensive properties, may not qualify or may not pay the luxury tax because a different combination of their size and simple building materials means that the formula works that they're not actually qualified for it. The limit currently is about $250,000, where if your property is appraised at $250,000 or above, according to that formula, you will have to pay that additional luxury tax. As an example, most recently, I have a home that's closing at $325,000. It is probably worth even a bit more in the current market because there's so much demand. It's very close to the beach and titled, and this wonderful little place. But even at $325,000, according to the luxury tax appraisal, we're nowhere near the $250,000 value to begin to pay that luxury tax. So it doesn't apply for a $325,000 market value property. You likely wouldn't see it until homes that are actually selling at about the $500,000 to $600,000 to $700,000 range. So that's a very quick overview of the taxes expats can expect to pay. You can also check videos that I've done on property management, where I talk a little bit about the taxes involved there, and another video where I do address more specifically the closing costs on a property. Sorry, I've got a lot of burps here. This must be a pretty bubbly one here. Our next question from Janice Ureña tonight is about the car rental situation and still high prices, whether cars are available or not. And that's a very well-timed question, Janice. I appreciate it. The situation is still dire here in Costa Rica. And in fact, everybody that's come in recently has told me they had to pay far more than they expected for their rental. Now, granted, this is February 23, 2022. We're in the midst of Costa Rica's high season, and you're getting huge numbers of international arrivals. But right now, the car rental situation is bad. Back in COVID, when Costa Rica shut down its borders, a lot of car rental agencies started cutting back on their inventory. I mean, we didn't have a single international or non-resident international arrivals were closed down from March until November of 2020. So understandably, they started to sell off cars and try and keep their business as compact as possible. Now they're dealing with the exact opposite and a huge surge of demand for rentals, and it's getting tough to find one at a reasonable price point. If you're coming down to Costa Rica and you're planning to spend 6 months to a year, at this juncture, I might even recommend just buying a car, because cars are very valuable commodities here, and you will be able to resell it when you leave the country. If you were going to stay here for 2 years, I would say hands down, don't even worry about it, buy a car. If you're going to be in the area for 6 months, you might consider it if you can't find one of the long-term car rental brokers. There are people in every community, myself included, who rent vehicles they own to visitors on cheaper rates than the big agencies like Avis, Dollar, Sixt, etc. Those people can have older cars that frequently present problems, like mine. You're not going to get a perfect automobile. You're not going to get great service. And you're going to have to accept all of that to get a car that is much cheaper on a long-term rental. But they do exist in a lot of the tourism areas. And if you do some research, it's worth looking into that long-term car rental possibility. If you are coming short-term and you're coming in the high season in Costa Rica, I would recommend booking your car rental 6 weeks ago. It is never. In fact, I had somebody talking about booking their car and rental or their Airbnb for an October trip. And I said, it's worthwhile right now to just book your car and lock it in, because I am positive come October, there won't be cars available at the same price. So if you're considering renting a car, plan very far in advance. If you're about to come to Costa Rica in a week or two and you don't already have your car rental, start looking for shuttles, buses, and other transportation opportunities, because you may have missed your opportunity to be able to rent a car while you're down here. Steve, thank you very much always for tuning in and for your questions. It's great to see you again. He asked, does Costa Rica allow for online purchasing of goods like from Amazon? And are those purchases subject to import taxes? Spectacular question. The answer to your first part is absolutely yes. Costa Rica allows you to purchase online from wherever and have it shipped down. Now you see more and more of these services every year facilitating Amazon purchases. For example, there's one that we used called AeroPost, where you literally paste the Amazon link for what you want into their website. You put out your address information and where you want it shipped here in Costa Rica, and AeroPost gives you the exact cost. Yes, import duties apply to everything from medical gear to car parts to a range of goods. Now, there aren't import duties on that gift card your mom is sending you, or a lot of things that are personal gifts. But when you buy stuff online and get it shipped to Costa Rica, this is a question I don't know where the rubber hits the road, but there are some things that, yes, customs will take aside and say, we need extra taxes for this 100%. And there are other things that people get shipped in every single day with absolutely no problem. To give some examples, I've heard of people shipping in pairs of glasses that Costa Rica Customs found and realized it was medical stuff. And so they essentially keep it at their point of entry until the US citizen comes down and pays the taxes. Car parts can also be held up by customs. If you order a book from Amazon, it will likely just come directly to where you shipped it and you won't have a problem. But long story short is absolutely, you can order stuff from Amazon and these different services legally. Getting it into the country, you're just depending on your delivery service to pay the taxes that are needed if they apply, and to get your package to its eventual destination. Bryn, will the health pass still be needed? I think that with this new change, the health pass is going out the window to be coming into Costa Rica. And I'm sorry I haven't read more articles on it just yet, but I do recall that was one of the things that they're doing away with, where previously to get on an international flight, you would have to fill out your health information and give all kinds of data in order to get on your plane in a foreign country. And then you have to present that here at immigration. I do think that has now been eliminated, but only as of April 1st. Remember, March, still all of the restrictions that we've seen are going to be in place. That QR code with 50% operation for businesses here that aren't enforcing it will still be in place in March. And so, yeah, I do believe that'll apply whether you're vaccinated or not. Going forward past April, they will not be asking for the health pass. Continuing forward here, we've got a question that's from Sir Williams, and a spectacular one as well. How is schooling in Tamarindo and the surrounding areas? If one was coming with small kids, are there private schools and public schools? Absolutely. I'll refer you to an episode I did about one private school, the Waldorf, where my kids go to school. In it, I mention the range of private options that are available. There is CRIA, the Costa Rica International Academy, La Paz Community School, Ways, Journey, Tide Academy, Educarte, and those are 6 private schools really sort of within, let's say, 20 minutes of Tamarindo itself. Those are 6 private schools that have about as diverse a philosophy as you can imagine. CRIA is very straightforward, sort of Prussian style education that lots of people, imagine when they think of school. Others like Journey are more goal focused or project based. Our Waldorf school is out in left field with all kinds of crazy, focus on arts and dancing and music, etc. So there are amazing schooling options here close to Tamarindo. And as a foreigner, you are generally going to be looking at the private options as the ones that would be good enough for you. Public can be a little rough around the edges because it resembles every underfunded school district on earth. The public system, especially here in Guanacaste, the poorer province of Costa Rica, is filled with the same problems you would see in urban Chicago school districts, or New York, or very rural Nebraska districts. They don't have enough money. The teachers are not fully inspired, trained, motivated, really passionate individuals. There's no incentive to be better. The pay is low, on and on and on. And public schools here can generally be found to be not workable for foreigners who hope that their kids can get a little bit better education than what they might expect where they're coming from. Another good question from is passion fruit eco-friendly? Another question from Steve. And that's actually one that somebody had asked, whether or not passion fruit can be grown here in Costa Rica. Yes, it absolutely can be. And I would say that almost any agricultural production that is intensive and sort of the concept of monoculture is never going to be eco-friendly. You would find fruits and vegetables that have lower levels of pesticides and herbicides that are grown in that system, and moderately higher ones. But really, the question that you should be looking for is, can you find a local supplier of organic passion fruit from a small family farm? And those are springing up more and more and more throughout the country. Passion fruit, I would bet that when it is industrially produced at huge quantities, I'm sure it also uses a large amount of herbicides, pesticides, etc. Pineapple and bananas get picked on because they're especially higher. But the biggest question is factory farming and monoculture versus small-scale organic farms. And if you can find access to those organic farms, Costa Rica can provide you with produce that is virtually pesticide-free. We've got in our area a truck that delivers, 40 or 50 different organic products every day that they aggregate. We have to send in our order a couple days ahead of time. They come by on Sundays. You're seeing that sort of service spring up throughout the country. And as soon as you lock into them, you can kiss, industrial agriculture goodbye and not necessarily have to worry about which products are higher intensive, use of pesticides and herbicides versus other. Yeah, absolutely. Sir Williams, it's nice to know you are my neighbor as well. Anyhow, it's 8:01 p.m. in Costa Rica, and once again, as on all my Wednesday night live chats, it's been a sincere pleasure speaking with all of you. I'm going to have to be, everybody's talking in there. We've got multiple neighbors now. I'm going to be live next Wednesday night with a spectacular interview with Doug Price, specifically about cars and car maintenance here in Costa Rica. Again, please be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can enjoy not only our live updates, but the best Costa Rica real estate information available on the internet. Again, my name is Costa Rica Matt Rosensteel. It's been a sincere pleasure. I wish you all a happy evening, pura vida, and good night.